UN 영어뉴스 2호 Cinema's Ultimate Scene Stealers. Georgi Skolimowski's groundbreaking new film attempts to tell its story from a donkey's perspective, reflecting a long history of animal actors on screen, writes Miriam Balanescu. In a landmark 2009 essay, the influential author John Berger argued that capitalist societies had commodified images of animals, reducing them to pictures of innocence. In our daily lives, he wrote, animals had been consigned to the realms of family or spectacle, most obviously as pets or in zoos. You, the latest feature from the Polish filmmaker Georgi Skolimowski, departs from the historically showy, contrived, and stunt-packed performances of animals in cinema, from the early caper boat de Jean Paul, Un Elephant, 1930, in which a child steals an elephant from a circus, to Fearless Fagan, 1952, where a newly enlisted soldier brings his pet Raya to the barracks. In its understated and yet emotionally devastating new film, Skolimowski, director of Le Depart, 1967, creates instead a more subtly crafted portrayal of an animal's experience, with shots that linger on Eo's pensive, wistful eyes, and sharp reverse shots that capture his gaze. The film makes a blisteringly compelling case for what it might be like to experience the world as a donkey. Eo begins as a circus goes bankrupt and its show animals are bundled into trucks, while a protest about animal welfare swarms portentously around them. From that point on, Eo the donkey is passed around a flurry of handlers, illegal horse meat traders, fox breeders, and an ex-trainee priest, Lorenzo Giurgiolo, who tells Eo that he has eaten salami made with donkey meat. In the interludes, where he briefly breaks free, Eo trots on, in hope of eventually returning home to his affectionate trainer, Cassandra Sandra Dzierżmalska. I treat the human stories as much less important, Skolimowski tells BBC Culture. I practically reduced them to vignettes. The stories I was telling about those few people were not exciting. They are typical human situations, where the actors demonstrate the most typical human behavior and moods: anger, love, the need for revenge. I only gave the minimum amount of information to the audience because they read between the lines. For me, the donkey, his reactions, his comments in those huge, melancholic eyes, was the most important element of the whole film. Eo makes a compelling case for what it might be like to experience the world as a donkey. Over the past decade, filmmakers, particularly in documentary, have looked beyond the human, foregrounding animals' stories and perspectives. Caddy 2016 and Stray 2020 followed vagrant cats and dogs, respectively, as they roamed the streets of Istanbul, attempting to carve out space for themselves within the rough and tumble metropolis. Bartek Konopka's Rabbi a la Berlin 2009 was vaunted for showing a brand new perspective on the fall of the Berlin Wall through the eyes of the rabbits that lived quietly, mostly free from human conflict in the zone between East and West Germany. Dennis Cotes Bestiaire 2012 observed the relationship between the captive animal and the human gaze. Emmanuel Grass's Bobin's Ola Vrei V. Des Vaches, A Cow's Life 2011, looked at the inner lives of livestock, and Victor Kosakovsky's wordless Barnyard Set documentary, Gunda 2021, focused on a mother pig. British director Andrea Arnold's first feature-length documentary, Cow 2021, was about showing the aliveness of a non-human animal. She told Vulture, our relationship with the millions of non-human lives we use is very much part of our existence. I made Cow to invite engagement with them, she wrote in The Guardian. This new curiosity in a creaturely perspective is gradually finding its way into fiction filmmaking. White God 2014 subverts the typical animal attack narrative of films like The Birds 1963 and Planet of the Apes 1968, portraying an animal uprising from a pound-bound dog's point of view. Italian director Pietro Marcello's Lost and Beautiful 2015 is a Shuduk documentary about the puppet figure Pulcinella, part told by the buffalo, who he leads to sanctuary. Michael Sarnowski's Pig 2021, starring Nicolas Cage, was named after his truffle hunting hog, in which the natural world seems to hang in the balance. This year, Martin McDonagh's Oscar-nominated The Passions of Inisherin features a standing ovation-worthy performance from Jenny the donkey and gives much more attention to the emotional gradations of its animal actors. In the past, animal actors have often been relegated to sentimental children's films like Lassie Come Home 1943 or Babe 1995. White God 2014 subverts the animal attack narrative, portraying an animal uprising from a dog's point of view. It was a premise of a donkey being passed between owners is taken from Robert Bresson's Our Hazard Balthazar 1966, but in that film the animal is secondary to the human story, a narrative vehicle that shoulders the burden of the central character's actions. Said to be inspired by Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Idiot, Bresson's parable centers on a man embodying Christian ideals, unable to survive the corruption of modern society. Io is by contrast enmeshed with contemporary environmental concerns, says Skolimowski. This film was made out of a love for animals and love for nature. He says, therefore, we will try to express the love in every possible way. So not only the beauty of the landscapes, the gentleness of the behavior of the animals, but even by trying to add some humor into the story. We tried to tell it lightly because the message was so important that we wanted to smuggle it in delicately. The message, Skolimowski says, pertains to industrial farming methods. Human nature is finally awake to the fact that meat consumption, and especially industrial farming, is something which as ethically is very questionable. How can we allow ourselves to decide about the life and the death of other living creatures? A changing perspective in eco-critical studies, the term anthropocentrism, treating humans as the superior entity in the universe, has become key to discussions around environmental disaster. Many animal studies experts claim that countering this assumption is crucial to tackling the climate crisis, while the rise in vegetarianism and veganism over the past decade, spurred by greater public knowledge of unethical industrial farming methods, has also increased awareness of the non-human. There has been a shift in the public in how we think about animals, mammals in particular. Dr. Anat Pick, a researcher who specializes in the intersection of animal and film studies, tells this culture it may be the sentience of animals. It may be the sentience of animals is no longer up for debate. It's also partly to do with the climate crisis and the people's understanding that human beings are not alone in the world, that we are a part of something. Anthropomorphism, whereby a non-human animal or object is given human characteristics, is at the heart, John Berger suggested, of humans' warped relationship with the animal world. Children's books such as Beatrix Potter's or films such as Homeward Bound 1993, which present a cast of talking animals, arguably turn them into mouthpieces for human issues and concerns. You reaches for much less anthropomorphic representation of its animal protagonist. You borrows its premise from Robert Bresson's 1966 film Au Hassad Balthazar. Midway through the film, the donkey, having made his escape from a sanctuary and trekked through field and forest, wanders into a small Polish town. The donkey was supposed to look at fish in a shop window, but it looked and it saw itself, its own reflection, and started to make a noise. His chief wrangler, Agatha Cordos, tells this culture there was a spontaneous reaction and was actually used in the film. Unlike a dog, which you can train to make noise on command, a donkey doesn't do that. Sometimes you think that you've trained the donkey to make a noise on command, but it doesn't work that way. He does whatever he likes. Moments like this, Pig suggests, are appearing more frequently in art house films and are what mainstream cinema should aim for. Animals are narrative disruptors, unless they are trained unless their movements are predictable. They introduce all these things that make cinema feel wonderful: spontaneity, unpredictability, movement, dynamism, and liveliness. If the director is committed to allowing that to happen, I think that makes for a greater animal film. Animals taking center stage. Animals have been on camera since cinema's inception. With the first filmic technology producing Ed Weird Muy Bridges Horse in Motion, 1878. The earliest film to star an animal actor, Rescued by Rover, 1905. So a brave dog reunited a kidnapped baby with his parents, featuring Holly Blair, soon to become a household name as the hero. These narratives of love, loyalty, and affection from animals have traveled all the way through cinema. Dr. Claire Parkinson, author of Popular Media and Animals, tells with culture. There is this romanticized reassurance of the human-animal bond. In its 1993 book, Picturing the Beast, Steve Baker argued the animals have stood in as symbols for a nation in war films. Think War Horse 2011, which follows a four-legged hero on the front line. War Dog 2022, starring Channing Tatum, a sentimental story about an army hound. Animals have been at the center of cinema ever since the first technology created. Ed Weird Muy Bridges Horse in Motion, 1878. In cinema's early years, animals were subjected to a fandom equal to that of human actors, from Rin Tin Tin, the German Shepherd, who reportedly snagged the most votes for the first Academy Awards and saved Warner Bros. From bankruptcy, to Rex the Wonder Horse, the madcap mare, who acted in blockbusters across the 1920s and 30s. Animal stars, particularly dogs, were treated in almost the same way in marketing and publicity as human stars were, says Parkinson. They got the same kind of coverage in the fan magazines. They would talk about what the dog was doing in the same way that they would talk about what humans were doing, as if the dogs were completely autonomous agents. Changes in regulations around animal welfare, led by the American Human Association, have also steered today's filmmakers away from using wild animals, such as lions and chimpanzees, as was once common. In Hollywood, a lot of studios had their own zoos, and they would bring animals in from various different countries. They would have people who would go out, capture them, and bring them in, explains Parkinson. This was evident in early skits, such as Charlie Chaplin's The Circus, 1928, or later, The Infamous Bedtime for Bonjo, 1951. During its production, lead actor Ronald Reagan was nearly strangled when the monkey yanked his time. Certainly, in the first half of the 20th century, people were fascinated by this idea of the African subcontinent, by the people and the animals, says Parkinson. So a lot of the films of the first half of the 20th century would be promoted on the basis that they had these wild animals in them. If you went to a zoo, you would see animals doing tricks and performing. Parkinson continues. People were fascinated by the idea of animals behaving like humans. In the first half of the 20th century, there was a lot of coverage of scientists who were bringing chimps up as if they were human. The introduction of a film rating system in 1968, Parkinson says, is when audiences for animal films diverged, with two genres emerging. Family-friendly films were the echoes of the 70s and 80s. Dogs, 1976, Long Weekend, 1978, and Night of the Lepus, 1972, for example, were about nature biting back, reflecting worries about human-inflicted damage. These same concerns drive this latest wave of animal films, though the impetus seems to stem from empathy rather than fear. Pick is concerned that the compassion may end there. We are trying to reconcile our terrible relationship to other animals in our daily lives with our ability to empathize with them and recognize them as persons, she says. For me, there is something very consensus building and reassuring about these films. People go to the cinema, they watch animals suffer, they feel good about themselves for feeling bad. In cinema's early years, animal stars like the German Shepherd Rin Tin Tin were celebrated as much as their human counterparts. Parkinson believes that it will never truly be possible to convey an animal story on screen without forcing it in some way to fit the human mold. Films are human-to-human communication, so for a narrative to work, there has to be a human interpretation of animal behavior, and that's on a spectrum. On one end, making an animal behave like a human would, to the other end, which is to have a human narration of animal behavior. She says it has to translate into a humanized story at some level. Otherwise, it would be incredibly difficult for us to make sense of. For Skolimowski, this was part of the appeal. Before embarking on the project of a year, the director and his wife and co-producer Iwa Piaskowska yearned for storytelling method, going beyond the classic linear structure, which was a bit boring for us, he says. We wanted to do something different in casting the animal character as the main character of the whole story, or even further, of telling the story through the animal character. We were trying to offer a voice to the voiceless, of those who couldn't speak for themselves. EO is released in the UK on 3 February